Good afternoon. I should also say good morning and good evening to those of you watching online. Welcome back. This is Sibjo's Jewellery Industry Voices seminar series here at The Voice, where we look at issues of interest in the jewellery business from the perspective of industry figures around the world. So welcome to this, the second of our seminar here today. My name is Edward Johnson. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you everybody for joining. The Jewellery Industry Voices webinar series started as an idea to bring the jewellery and watch trade together using Zoom back when the pandemic started in March this year. So from April to July, we hosted weekly webinars on a wide range of topics, starting initially on how to survive the COVID pandemic and how to deal with it and the challenges that it brought to our industry. By the end of July, we had hosted 15 webinars, invited 15 panelists of leading gem and jewelry industry professionals, and had over 6,500 views online with a weekly average audience of around 500 people, our community through the lockdown. If you wish to review any of those webinars, they are all available online on Sibjo's YouTube channel, and we encourage you to watch them when you have time. Today, we are discussing Africa and the African gem and jewelry industry. We expect this seminar to last about an hour and 15 minutes. Africa has a bright future, and many economists agree. By 2050, the UN predicts there will be 2.5 billion Africans, about a quarter of the global population. Importantly, 10 of the youngest countries in the world will be on the African continent. This explosion in working age population presents a big opportunity. As young Africans move into the workforce with fewer dependents to care for, they will have the chance to accumulate wealth, savings, and purchasing power, and thus boost economic growth on the continent. Additionally, a 2018 McKinsey & Company report titled Rethinking the African Business Opportunity announced that survey respondents believe that 20 years from now, its combined GDP will be among the fastest growing in the world. In the jewelry industry, we must start thinking as Africa as much more than a continent that simply supplies the raw materials that make up our jewelry. Africa is an important source of creativity, talent, and entrepreneurs, and also increasingly consumers. Today, I am joined with an amazing panel and a moderator that prove that point and that growth of entrepreneurship within the continent of Africa. It gives me great privilege to introduce our panelists one by one, most of whom are calling in from all points of the compass in Africa today. Firstly, we have with us Satta Matturi. Satta is the founder and creative lead of the award-winning brand, Satta Matturi Fine Jewellery, which she founded after a 17-year diamond career as a sales and diamond rough expert with one of the world's largest diamond mining groups. Being both British and West African, Satta combines deep felt traditions and heritage from the African continent, mixed with a global view of trends, attitudes, and inspiration. She lives between Botswana and the UK. And I'm very much hoping, Satta, you're on the line with us today. Satta, are you with us?
I am, yes.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone.
Lovely to hear you. You're calling in from Gaborone today?
Yes, I am. So I'm calling in from Gaborone, Botswana.
Thank you for being with us, Satta. Next, I'd like to turn from Southern Africa to East Africa. Monica Gichuhi. Monica passionately advocates for the ASM, the artisanal and small-scale subsector in Africa, and is currently focused on promoting responsible sourcing of gemstones through her initiative, the Africa Gem Exhibition and Conference, which supports ASM gemstone miners in Africa. She recently also co-founded the Virtual Gems platform to pilot virtual purchasing of gemstones and support miners during the pandemic. She's also on the board of the Association of Women in Mining in Africa, representing Eastern Africa. Monica, how nice to see you in your wonderful, colorful outfit today. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Edward. Good to see you as well.
You're in Nairobi today. How's everything for you there?
I am in Nairobi. Quite cold, but good.
Thank you. And now we turn to somebody live in the room with me. We have Patricia Mweene from Inonge, Zita, Zambian Gemstones. Patricia is a jewelry designer and an entrepreneur from Zambia, but now also based in Denmark. She is the founder of Inonge Zita, Zambian Gemstones, which is a sustainable fine jewelry brand based in Copenhagen. She's also the co-founder of 12 Keys Consultancy and Design, a strategic advisory that works at the intersection between business, design, and culture. As an entrepreneur who lives in two cultures, Patricia uses design thinking for extractive communities as a tool for fostering sustainable development. Thank you for being here today, Patricia.
Thank you for having me. So it's good to be here.
I'd like to turn now to South Africa, and we have Thomas or Labi Kapo. Labi is a master goldsmith and a diamond mounter, one of the first Africans to work in the UK jewelry industry. He specializes in platinum and has over 40 years experience having trained in London. After 28 years in the trade there, he moved to South Africa in 2002 to open his own high-end jewelry manufacturing business, Akapo Jewels, in Johannesburg. Also, as well as running Akapo Jewels, since 2004, Labi has been training young entrepreneurs in the jewelry industry and teaches at the University of Johannesburg, the Faculty of Art, Design and Architecture, and also at the University of Technology School for Jewelry Design and Manufacturing in the Free State Province. Labi, how nice of you to join us today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm fine, Edward. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Nice for you to be with us. Thank you. And lastly, and most importantly, for today's discussion, we are honored to have Nere Teriba with us to moderate this discussion. Nere is the founder and executive vice chairman of Kian Smith Trade and Company, a mining and minerals trading firm based in Lagos, Nigeria. Nere is an entrepreneur, a mediator, and a strategist, and is actively dedicated to developing the West African gold chain. Nere, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Edward. Thank you.
Now, we're going to do something really unusual in that two of us here in the room. But Nere, I'd like you to take over now and moderate us through a really interesting discussion about the future, the past, the present, and the future of the African gold and diamond and gemstone industries.
Thank you, Edward. I'd like to start first by thanking Edward Johnson and Steve as well, Steve Benson, for, I guess, putting this thought process together, and also Sibgil and the Italian exhibition group. So special thanks to them for bringing up this important discourse of jewelry in Africa. So we're going to talk through several topics, and we all have our areas of expertise, and sometimes we'll zone in our expertise, but I think we all have something to contribute. The first question I have, and I kind of wanted Satta to give some feedback on this. Beyond mining, what's your view on inclusion of Africans in the jewelry value chain? How does this differ based on regions that you know about in the continent, and even maybe depending on the category of jewelry? What's your thought on that, Satta?
So I think we need to start with understanding that the continent of Africa has had an affiliation with jewelry for centuries. And I think you just need to look at, from Egypt to South Africa, right across. So that has always been there. But I think when you look at sort of industries further down from extraction of the raw material in the form of minerals or precious stones, then, further down the chain, there's less inclusion. And why is that? And to me, it goes back to sort of, barriers to entry from someone coming in. Factors like, it's a capital-intensive industry, access to raw materials, which is not very easy. The cost of the raw materials themselves, accessing of networks, getting your business hygienics right, and also the fact that the centers of excellence that you find further down the value chain are always located elsewhere. But I think, to be honest, I think things have moved on. I think we're starting to see some changes. And I think from a gender aspect, I think we're seeing a lot more women getting involved. I think you talked about sort of the differences in the regions and certain categories of jewelry. I think there are differences in the various regions, and you tend to find probably more inclusion in the populated countries such as, South Africa and Kenya, and maybe Monica and Labi would probably elaborate on that. But I, having worked in the diamond industry for quite some time, I've seen, from that aspect, I've seen some involvement, albeit small, but in terms of diamond cutting and polishing in Botswana, Namibia, and also South Africa, I think, there's been sort of, quite a lot of involvement there further down. But I think in most parts, I think largely it's driven by what you call, small-scale artisanal making of jewelry.
Thank you. Speaking of inclusion, I see Monica nodding. And Monica, you're a strong advocate for inclusion. And Satta even mentioned gender, especially the same thing, gender integration in the extractive industry value chain. Monica, you've been in public and private sector where minerals are concerned in the whole value chain. So please comment on this gap, especially this gap that remains for African participation in the jewelry value chain. Despite being a prevalent source for raw materials for the industry, what are the barriers? Satta alluded to them, but what are some of the barriers you think are still existing to having more African involvement in the value chain? And if you could also even comment on something Satta mentioned about Kenya, for example. Kenya is one of the big economies in Africa. Maybe there's some differences in Kenya versus other parts. So, Monica, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Nere. Good to be here. Quite a loaded question, starting from inclusivity from the point of the sector itself. Then there's the gender inclusivity part in the jewelry supply chain. And I want to appreciate what Satta has said, that jewelry making has been in Africa for a very long time. It's one of the cottage industries in the continent. Yet, when you go higher up in the value chain, you don't find as many Africans as you'd expect in it. To add on to what Satta has said, I'll also say lack of awareness of the size and opportunity in this industry. The fact that it has been a cottage industry, we have remained in wearing our semi-precious, sort of jewelry, and have not realized the potential of formalizing and the opportunity that formalization would tap higher up in the value chain. And I think I also attribute that to lack of craftsmanship, where we've remained artisanal in making of our jewelry. We've not gotten, proper sort of schools. I would be at pains to think of a proper jewelry school in Africa that really, trains in the right jewelry making skill, the right craftsmanship to make the sort of high-end jewelry that, where we tap into the opportunity of this multi-billion sector, right? And I think at that point, as you said, I've been in government, and I think also the governments in Africa have not caught up to the opportunity of this industry. We have a huge issue of unemployment in the continent. We have a huge youthful population in the continent. And for me, I see an opportunity in this sector being an employer of a lot of women and a lot of youth. If there was more focus in formalizing it, resourcing it as is required, putting in the right schools, creating awareness among Africans themselves of the opportunity of this multi-billion global industry, and what they're missing by not formalizing and getting on it and participating in the right spaces, because there's getting on it and also being in the right space in the value chain where you're actually tapping into the opportunities that are there. That said, I'd also want to talk about the huge opportunity of Africa being a source of these minerals, and not just looking at this industry outwards, where we are designing to sell outwards, which has always been the, like the problem in the mining sector, where we mine in order to export and don't see ourselves as consumers of what we extract, right? I think there's an opportunity to develop the jewelry sector in such a manner that it is from African resources, made by Africans, and also designed for African market. We are creating an awareness for not just making the jewelry, but also consuming this jewelry, that Africans are able to also buy it and wear it as, manufactured in Africa and by Africans for them. I think there's a huge opportunity lacking in that as well. Thanks, Nera.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. It's interesting that Monica says this. So Patricia, I want to kind of talk about this opportunity. She mentions the opportunity in Africa. However, we know the reality on the ground that the African jewelers were impacted by low-cost imports from countries, for example, like China. How does this affect strategic thought towards African participation in the jewelry value chain? How does this also pose as a market opportunity? Patricia, what are your thoughts?
Obviously, cheap Chinese imports are a threat to any industry around the world, because you cannot compete with the cheap labor from China. Having said that, I can only give an example from Zambia, where I'm originally from, and that example actually is applicable to all of Africa. The thing is, yes, the Chinese imports are a threat to establishing a thriving jewelry industry in Africa. But on the other hand, in order to be successful as a jeweler, one has to be original, So there is a market for jewelry in Africa. African women do buy cheap Chinese jewelry. It's affordable, yeah. But that doesn't mean that they're not interested in buying something that is locally made, which has the DNA of their heritage. So in having this huge influx of Chinese jewelry in Africa, it also it presents an opportunity for African jewelers actually to differentiate from themselves from these mass-produced products from China. I always say that we cannot compete on quantity but we can compete on quality. We need to focus on doing the best that we can with what we have. So.
Good. Thank you, Patricia. So Satta, since we're speaking about markets, how do we stimulate international demand for jewelry designed by and made by Africans? I mean, what else can you comment on the state and opportunity of the domestic market in Africa? It's interesting, some of what Patricia is saying about original design, but all these are all just economics, demand, supply, and finding opportunity. So if you could just maybe comment on this.
Thanks, Neri. Good question. And I think we first need to understand that the general sort of perception has always been attributed to designs of a particular type. And it's been kind of like categorized into something you get from what you call a curio store, or trinkets and paraphernalia of a lesser value. So firstly, I think perception needs to change. Consumers need to be re-educated that this is not a true representation. Having said that, I've seen, I mean, today there's some really great African brands out there in fashion, furniture, and art that we're seeing, and they're doing like really edgy, contemporary and authentic designs that have global representation and reputations managed by designers either on the continent or, the diaspora living outside. And I do not see why jewelry shouldn't follow the same path. Secondly, I think as consumers globally are becoming more aware of ethical sourcing, sustainability, provenance and craftsmanship, which Monica sort of alluded to earlier on, when you look at that and then consider where African countries are positioned in the value chain, and coupled with its long tradition of artisanal processes, I think there's a real potential for sustainable brands to sort of emerge from Africa, as opposed to the mass-produced, approach that we've seen in other parts of the world. Again, I think Patricia talked about that. And also, I'd like to say, on the reverse, there's a great opportunity for established jewelers and, the trade outside from the rest of the world to work with artisans and look to collaborate on innovative projects that will create sort of like what I call a win-win, situation for both parties. So I think we need to see more of these. And a recent, not recent, but an example I can give was the high-end jewelry house called Shawme, who actually collaborated with a Kenyan-born graphic artist. I think this was about a couple of years ago in a high-end, jewelry collaboration. So I think we're seeing a lot more of that, and I think there's more to come. And lastly, Neri, if I could just add in there to say, while success has always been measured by the uptake of international consumers, I don't think we should forget the size of the home market. And I think, again, Monica talked about that. The population of Africa is set to double by 2050, as Edward said. When you add to that the growth in urbanization, small-scale industrialization that we're seeing, increased digital and mobile accessibility, I think that would in turn translate to a middle class that has more disposable income to be able to, go for aspirational purchases. And so I think the size of the consumer opportunity in future must be embraced.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. Labi, it was interesting when Monica was speaking. One of the things she hounded on was lack of craftsmanship and advanced training in jewelry making. And I think part of the discussion here of what's affecting markets is also that, should we say, training. But you seem to have foreseen this critical window of time of the African jewelry industry needing advanced education, especially utilizing technology. How can technology with education help Africans get ahead in the jewelry industry? And how well do you think it's developed presently at the local level in Africa?
Wow, well, it's quite what a question. I'm trying to which way to answer you from that. Yes. Well, let me answer Monica. Well, yes, we do have a school. We are teaching here in South Africa. We're an accredited service provider, and we offer certification for the training and skills program that they have existed in South Africa before I came. And that's probably one of the reasons why I actually came to South Africa to set up our business here. Going on to that, I've got over 40 years experience in the jewelry manufacturing industry, where I personally do teach on a one-to-one basis in between our school and as well as a university. And I think it's very important, and it was for me, to take up the industry from the historical point of view, because I was able to travel to Brussels when I was about 9-10 years as a goldsmith. And what really inspired me, I was able to see jewelry in Brussels, which were going on show around the world. It wasn't coming to the UK, so I actually went to Brussels to see this industry. There I saw jewelry made by African people going back 4,000 years, and that in itself inspired me, and I used the same material to inspire others. I can touch a bit more on that a bit later, but that's the biggest difference, I believe. That's going to make the difference in the jewelry industry. I don't believe I'm a loner. There must be others. Even though I was told that they couldn't find others, because I wrote an article for a magazine called The New African, where I was interviewed about Africa's raw materials, and I spoke quite highly of the industry here, and I also mentioned Mansa Musa, who's one of the kings of West Africa, of Mali in Timbuktu. And here he was worth over 400 billion US dollars 700 years ago, and many of us have hardly heard anything about him. So I use that as an example. Lo and behold, CNN, the director of that, saw the article in the magazine, which was circulating in America, and called to make a documentary on us. So I definitely wanted to play my part in the skills transfer, and I also advertise as much as I can. Come to South Africa, learn the skill here, or we can also come out and set up in other neighbouring countries. And that's what we're also looking at this time in our skills programs.
Thank you. Thanks, Labi. It's good to know that.
Can I just add on to that?
Yes, please.
In terms of education. In Zambia, we've had a gem cutting school for 32 years. Lots of skilled gem cutters, and they actually learn how to design gem cuts using technology. I think it's called gem cut. So the skills are there. And then speaking of training as well, in the 90s, from the 80s up to the 90s, we have there's quite a number of skilled goldsmiths as well. Some of them have Italian trained, believe it or not. There's an Italian lady that started a jewellery making school in Zambia and trained a lot of Zambian goldsmiths. And she used to bring in some Italian instructors to teach them how to do pavé setting. So what we struggle with actually is just connecting these different silos. The cutters are there, the goldsmiths are there, but obviously at the moment the ecosystem is the jewellery ecosystem is like in its infancy, you know. But just to touch on the topic of the subject of education and technology, that has been going on in Zambia for a while. The challenge is obviously connecting all these different silos and getting them to work together.
And I think it's interesting you're saying that, Patricia, because what I'm seeing here from what Labi has shared and what you've shared is there really is no need so much to go out of the continent. Maybe there's already a lot going on the continent in terms of advanced training. Yeah. But the issue, like you said, is really maybe a communication gap. So Monica, I mean, to what degree do you see communication technology like mobile phones and social media and maybe just better networking, should we say, interconnection for the African industry? It's really amazing. Also, like Edward commented on all these webinars that have come out of this lockdown. And really, we can see that communication technology has suddenly become vital to the world in the last 6 months. How do you see this impacting the jewelry market and industry in Africa from a perspective of training and also even market connection?
Yeah, I think the one thing the pandemic has shown us is the superiority of technology in terms of maintaining human connection and communication. And we've also seen in terms of communication, if I may speak about Kenya, about innovation in technology. We were the innovators of M-Pesa, where now it's brought a lot of inclusivity in the financial sector, where people in the remotest parts in the village can now, have a handset and are receiving and transacting what would be considered unbankable population in the past. And I think it's time for us to also, take advantage of this kind of innovations in the jewelry sector. One thing for sure, I have never met Labi. I did not know Labi had a school, but because of being connected with him via this channel, now I know we have a jewelry school and something going on in terms of skills and resourcing there. And because of preparation for this webinar, I actually wrote to his company, to him and his general manager, and I said, Labi, listen, there's a huge opportunity for collaboration and partnerships to do more of these kind of trainings that your company is doing out of South Africa and reaching to other parts of Africa. And of course, because of affordability, we could use technology to do that. We could be able to have Labi train 100 more youthful and women across Africa, seated from the comfort of his office in South Africa, if webinars have taught us anything to go by, right? We also now have the opportunities like, I think Patricia has mentioned, we're all operating in little silos. Everybody is doing very good work, but in our own little silos. So I think what technology could give us is a platform to be able to do it in a more interconnected manner, exchange experiences, and we also don't reinvent the wheel. If there's something Satta has tried in way of positioning and marketing her brand, and we have a younger upcoming jeweler who, is trying to venture into the same spaces, they could connect, and exchange experiences and, apprenticeship, opportunities for apprenticeship without necessarily having to travel across kilometers to meet each other via using technology, right? I've also seen on social media, when I started working with a lot of people from the jewelry sector, the power of social media in positioning brands and in marketing and, and showing what people are doing. I've certainly seen jewelers from Kenya who I didn't actually know the kind of work they do, but I've seen them on social media. And I've seen we have excellent jewelers in Kenya right now. And I'm fascinated by the sort of Afro-fusion brands I've seen in jewelry coming up now, targeting the millennials, who, of course, they use technology for just about anything in their life. And these brands are actually marketing and positioning themselves for this kind of audiences, right? Packaging themselves for that kind of audience. So there's a lot more to be done, a lot more to be tapped into. And allow me, Nere, to also mention the newly established AFTAC, the Africa Free Trade initiative that has just come up, where Africans now are being challenged to do trade across all the 54 states. This is a new initiative by all the head of states under the African Union, where all industries, everybody is asking themselves, we have opened up Africa to become one trade area. How can we tap the jewelry industry to take advantage of this opportunity? Each country is endowed with something that we need. One country has resources, another has skill, another has a huge population that could form a market, another has huge culture in terms of ancient jewelry designs. How do we, in the jewelry sector, in the jewelry supply chain in Africa, take advantage of this new huge trading bloc that has been created by the African Union to be able, again, riding on technology, to interconnect and to trade and to position the African jewelry sector using technology?
That's good. Thank you, Monica. Patricia.
Neri, can I quickly just come in there with something?
Go ahead.
It was just to reiterate. I think a lot's been said, but I just wanted to share, some staggering figures whereby, from a technology or a mobile data traffic across the continent, which is expected to sort of increase considerably. And I think in Africa, I was reading the other day that, they have 120 million active mobile money accounts, which is over 50% of the global total. So again, it just goes to show the sheer, opportunity there. Monica's touched on social media. I think that's a fantastic phenomenon for the continent, given the fact that one can actually instantly reach out to markets globally. But I think the one thing I just want to put in there, and maybe not for this discussion, mobile and data costs remain very expensive on the continent, and I think probably one of the most expensive globally. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you're really correct when you think about that. Despite the expense, like you mentioned, of mobile data, we still have so many mobile users. And so one would wonder, also on the reverse side, Patricia, like maybe in Zambia, for example, do you find that the local jewelry association there provides good industry support in terms of getting them access to international trade groups or maybe just relevant connections? And do you have any suggestions or examples that you can maybe suggest if that's not the case presently in Zambia?
Currently, there isn't an existing, there is a jewelers association, but there isn't really like an established jewelry ecosystem. But there's a project which is in its infancy, whose goal is to actually get all jewelers and gem cutters under one roof. And one of the offerings, for members in this association is that they will be able to access training as well as group discounts when purchasing equipment from overseas. Having said that, it's also important to say that because there isn't this kind of a foundation yet, in order for this Jewelers Association to work, it's going to need the help of for it to success, partnering with established international Jewelers Association who can actually provide mentoring is essential to its success. And where I'm in my capacity, as somebody that has one foot in Denmark and the other foot in Zambia, I've obviously reached out to the Danish Jewelers Association to get them to help Zambian jewelers, form their own association. So that's one thing that we're working on. But to answer your question, there isn't an established jewelers association, but that does not mean that there aren't mechanisms at the moment or activities that are going on in the background to help everyone come together. Because as I mentioned earlier, with everyone operating in a silo, it's very difficult to create a thriving jewelry industry. So if there has to be a thriving jewelry industry in Africa, the different value chain partners need to come together and solve the challenges of the industries. So that will mean that the people mining the gold and the gemstones will have to communicate, with established refineries on the continent, and the gem cutters will have to form partnerships with goldsmiths, and goldsmiths will have to form partnerships with jewelry designers, and in that way get a complete jewelry value chain working. and hopefully get all the players in the value chain under an umbrella. So.
It's good. Well, excuse the light. This is Africa. I'm here. Well, we just lost power, but that's okay. Monica, did you have something to add? Yes, please.
Yes, please. Yes. In terms of associations in Africa, let me at this point mention the Association of Women in Mining in Africa, whose aim is to position, and to really showcase the women in the value chain, in the minerals value chain in Africa. And currently, what we are focused on is actually, we realize most women are either in gold or gemstones. And in between, we have women who are trying to add value. Case in point, I'm wearing some very low-grade, tumbles. I think they are, what are they called? Turquoise. I bought from a woman from Malawi. So what the Association of Women in Mining is trying to do is actually bring together all the women in the supply chain to showcase and create awareness of the opportunity in the jewelry industry, and to also create platform for people to get to know each other and work together, establish collaborations and partnerships, to position the industry in the continent. So what we've sought to do in the past, we've done a couple of webinars talking about the voices of the women, showcasing the women who mine and the women who are in the, doing other activities in the value chain. We've talked about at some point, the challenges and the opportunities. And we want to use the Association of Women as well to position the jewelry industry in Africa. And we currently are running a competition where we are asking the players in the value chain to collaborate and partner and to create a showpiece, have women create a showpiece that will show that gold from Africa mounted, who are the jewelers who mounted it, who supplied the gold, who supplied the gemstones, and stop just telling narratives and having conversations, but actually showcase the opportunities and the talents available in the continent, yeah? So anybody interested can go to the AWIMA website and get to learn what we are doing to really position and showcase the jewelry industry.
All right, thank you. Labi, I know you humbly like to emphasize your skill as a goldsmith and your expertise with platinum, but we actually consider you one of the continent's best master craftsmen in precious metals and gemstones. But from your training and beginnings in London to your experiences in several African countries, it's been a very rich journey. Can you share some of the obstacles you faced in the West versus what you faced in Africa and how you've overcome them?
Well, some of the obstacles, first of all, is people having an understanding that we were already doing jewelry in Africa thousands of years ago. And it paid off when I went to Brussels, because I did actually, as I said, jewelry manufactured over 4,000 years ago. Not only was it just the gold jewelry, I was also seeing the lapidary that was also occurring. And I'm going to just quickly mention, most of us know Tutankhamun's death mask. It's 11 kilos of gold, 22 carat. Not to forget his actual tomb, which is 1 ton of gold. Just to give you an idea of the type of work we were doing in Africa before anybody else came. And if I have come across stories where someone said, oh no, someone brought that information to us. But then when I do my research, I don't find anything older than what we've already got in Africa. I should be able to see a sample somewhere else if they brought that information to us. So you find that we are the beginning of the industry. There's lapis lazuli. It's a stone that only comes from Afghanistan, but you find it's all over Egypt. This is 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. Cornelian, turquoise, these are all stones that we were using. Enamel, you can see that being used. I saw all this being used. And not forgetting platinum. The earliest points of platinum go back 1200 BC. There's another one. There's a queen, Shenep Upet. She was buried in a gold and platinum sarcophagus with hieroglyphs all around it. Not only that, they actually put in a platinum casket with her, box made in platinum. So the box does exist. If you need to see it, you can go to Paris, to the Louvre Museum, and you'll see it there. There's not that people don't know that we were manufacturing jewellery. We've always done it. The point of the question is how much are we going to do in-house? Because I grew up in London. I know, for instance, when I had an office in Mintec here in South Africa, I saw figures of 400 tons of gold production a year in London. In Italy, it was 600 tons. In Germany, it was 600 tons per year of gold production. But there isn't any gold mines there, like the quantity we have in the African continent. Yet we see gold bars leaving here continuously. So we should, and I believe I'm playing my part, in uploading the skills to our people here and give them employment so that we can sell a finished product rather than sell a gold bar overseas. Challenges I had, people didn't believe what I did, and they were so shocked they didn't know, and I got asked questions over and over when I was in London. Did you make that? Did you make it all by yourself? And then eventually I've got a whole catalogue of pictures of my jewellery before it entered auction houses, because I did enter, most of my work did go into auction houses in Sotheby's, Christie's and Phillips. So I've got pictures with my finger. I have to put my finger there to show you that it's mine, so that if anyone wants to challenge me at a later point, I can show them the picture of my finger and also the picture in the magazine. So it was a matter of we should be training ourselves, which we are doing, and we should encourage ourselves. Unfortunately, not all our governments understand the role that we play in the industry, because they're so used to seeing it being done by other people all the time, and other people exporting it to us. We should be exporting it to them and as a finished product, because we can do it, we have done it, and we're still doing it even to this day.
Can I just add on to what you've said? Zimbabwe, for example, has a huge gold industry. And Zimbabweans, believe it or not, are some of the best goldsmiths in Africa, but nobody hears about that. Zimbabweans are some of the best gem cutters in Africa, but you don't hear about that. And the reason why they're the best at gem cutting is because they have a history, a tradition for working with stone, you know. If we go to Ghana, Ghana also has a history of gold mining. They've perfected the traditional art or skill of casting, you know. So you don't need to invest in a lot of technology. You can just continue using traditional skills. Same with the Ethiopians as well. So on one hand, you know, everyone is looking outward to see what skill or what technique, you know, or machinery or technology for that matter, that we can acquire from Italy and make jewellery the same way as the Italians do. But then we've got our own traditional skills and traditions that we can build upon. We don't always need to pander, you know, for what the Europeans or the Westerners do. It's very important actually to use that unique DNA heritage to develop our own distinct designs. So.
You know, Patricia.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Labi.
So, I think that is going on, because with what I see with the young people, I always encourage them to go to their rural areas. There's plants and insects and all different types of things that is unique to their environment. There you employ the skill to manufacture and things that are around your environment. And there is markets all around the continent. We shouldn't just always look outside continuously. Yes, I was involved in the skills industry in London. Yes, we did do a lot of copies and replicas of Cartier, Boucheron, a few of the other top companies, but I'm not doing the same here. I could if I wanted to, but I am copying the environment I'm in at the moment, and it's Africa. So most of our designs are based around what we're doing in Africa and the leaves and everything else that you can see in your environment.
That's good. I mean, Patricia, back to what you were saying, because you were talking about traditions and even legacy, and now Labi's taking us right into inspiration in jewelry design. So Patricia, I was looking at your heirloom collection, and it's inspired by, I think, your Lozi background of the Mekenge wedding baskets that are passed down from mother to daughter. And it just speaks of legacy and the continuation of culture in the midst of celebration. So how would you say, how strong is the culture of adornment in Africa? And how does this affect jewelry design?
I think the culture of adornment in Africa is very strong. The industry, we might not be able to see the industry visibly and even quantify it in terms of dollars or number of people employed, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. For anyone who's visited in Africa, you go to any tourist area, you will see, you'll be able to come home with a piece of African jewelry. It might not be like Italian design, but you can buy traditionally made bracelets, earrings. If you're in South Africa, you will buy, you can buy Zulu-inspired jewelry. If you are in Kenya, you be able to buy Maasai-inspired jewelry. If you're in West Africa, you can buy, the Fulani, the Fulani earrings, which have been very popular the last 5 years or 10 years, and have become like a collector's statement piece. So if you're in Ethiopia, you can get the cross of, is it Lalibela?
Lalibela.
Lalibela, yeah.
Lalibela.
If you're up in Egypt, you've got the key of life. So the tradition of adornment in Africa is very, very strong. And each region, each country has its own distinct way of using raw materials to create jewelry.
Yeah.
So.
Satta, you're a genius in the art of storytelling. I'm a very big fan, and you just, like I said, a genius in the art of storytelling through jewelry in particular. You take inspiration from African-inspired batik, lace fabrics, West African tribal masks, and my favorite, the calabash. And you do this all, sometimes taking what may seem like complicated, fearful objects, and you just bring such beauty to them. Truly bespoke pieces. So just along the same line, as an African jewelry designer, what are your thoughts on Pan-Africanism in cultural inspiration for design?
So thank you, Mary. So I'm going to start by, so for the benefit of the audience listening in and also the audience in Vicenza, to define or sort of give some sort of thinking on what Pan-Africanism is. And what it is an ideology or a movement of solidarity amongst Africa, its people, and also its people outside, so that diaspora living outside. And it's mainly, or it has been mainly driven by political awareness, but also by, cultural consciousness as well. However, I think it's worth considering, and I think a few people have actually made this point. The African continent is made up of 54 countries. And much like Europe, there are different cultures and approaches, whether you're north, south, east, or west, each one having its own, sort of heritage and culture in language and food and music and fashion. But having said that, I think the digital era and movement of people, so travel, has created much more of a Pan-African connection and link amongst Africans, both on the continent and outside the continent, with that diaspora actually playing a crucial part towards the movement, because they've acquired the talent and the expertise and the exposure. So as a designer myself, living both on the continent and in Europe, I have access to a wealth of inspiration from an entire continent to tap on and be inspired by. So essentially, when you add a design perspective to the Pan-Africanism ideology, what you start to see is an amalgamation and coming together of creatives from various design spheres, collaborating and appreciating what each other has to offer. And so there's this explosion of culture, and I refer to it as the African Renaissance, where the younger generation are now more aware of their current economic and political situation. And increasingly, what we're seeing, they're more accepting of their regional identity, their history, their heritage. Again, a few people have actually touched on those. And I think, the digital era has also brought them much closer with one another, but at the same time connected them with the rest of the world. So, the rest of the world is a touch of a button. Now, there are no more barriers for these new creatives coming in. The rules in creative design thinking is there are no more rules. And they're asking questions like, who am I? What do I stand for? How can I interpret this from a perspective that addresses a need state? And I think this approach has brought about authenticity in the products and experiences that are being born on the continent and also outside, in my case, African-inspired fine jewellery. And I think that's created an immense amount of space for graphic designers, artists, writers, musicians to build on their successes. However, I think there's a little caveat that I'd like to add there. It's a shared responsibility. And I think Monica actually talked about this. And I'm going to bring in the African governments who must realize this potential and ensure that the necessary infrastructure and investment and support and promotion is given. So in conclusion, I think, Pan-Africanism has become less about politics and more about, culture and rediscovering your identity, pretty much going back to your roots. And I think it's an emerging continent with its own extraordinary challenges, if I can say that, no doubt, but certainly one that, where it's going to bring about more energized efforts, and one which I think the rest of the world will be really keeping a close eye on.
That's good. I want to combine something here for Labi. Give me 1 second, please. For Labi. I couldn't help when Satta was speaking, because something, Labi, you've been emphasizing over and over was the impact of your experience in Belgium and seeing that history of what was available to you. And something you didn't mention here, but even in identity, you were in London, you were doing all you can to prove yourself as a great goldsmith and a jeweler. And then you go find out that, wow, this is your legacy, and it was liberating. Kind of like what Satta is saying, the whole identity. And you also mentioned how big an impact this has on all your students. Every student, you say, is impacted when you show them this legacy. Just to touch on this, kind of like based on the way Satta said this, how do you really find that inspiration from, like Satta is saying, knowing history? Now I'm also, combining, but now for us to enter the last theme here, how do you see this as being key for the next generation of African talent, especially to thrive in this global jewelry business?
Well, it's not, what I do is I encourage my students to do as much as they can by hand and less by machine. I mean, because we are aware that there's what they call CAD, computer-aided designs, but it's not the same as manufacturing. The dimensions and measurements, you need to know how to do this by hand. And I was fortunate, I was very good at technical drawing when I was at school, going back all those years when I was at school. So that really inspired me. So I am able to show my students, look, this is how you go about it. You don't have to use a computer and then come back and glue it onto a surface and then start cutting out. No, you need to know how to draw it on and design. So that plays its major part. The other parts I should have also emphasized at the beginning stages. Yes, I'm talking about the jewelry in the past, but I also need to emphasize is that we couldn't make the jewelry without the blacksmiths. How we needed our tools, so even down to cutting solder. I'm just saying how basic it is. Mm-hmm. So the tools are already in place. What we need to know is how big is the gap, why we don't know why these tools exist, because when you look at a piece of jewelry in the ancient past, they can't make it other than the tools that we've got of today. So somewhere along that line, there's this huge gap, and this gap's been left wide open, and we seem to want to think that something's a mystery because it happened some thousands of years ago. No, I always say it was made, and other people came along and they decided to remove things and put things aside. And you only need to go 2 or 3 generations, and before you know it, everyone's forgotten what you did in the past. Once you've actually stopped and held back and denied people their heritage. So it's more about heritage. I keep emphasizing to my students over and over, you need to know what went on in the past. That way you'll be able to go forward with a big up your chest, go forward with a big smile and say, yes, we did before, we can do it again. And I emphasize that. I can't emphasize how much I emphasize it over and over.
That's awesome. I think, Patricia, you had a thought.
Yeah, I just wanted to give an example of like Pan-Africanism in action. I don't know whether it's the correct one, but Beyonce's last video, is it I Am King? What was the title? There is like a huge influence from Africa, you know, from jewellery designers, graphic designers, and photographers, and fashion designers. One can really see how strong actually African design heritage is, you know, by studying Beyonce's video, because she has drawn inspiration from Africa, and she worked with a photographer from South Africa and another one from Ghana, and I believe a Senegalese fashion designer. So for me, watching this video, I mean, the video actually summarizes what the new Pan-African identity is. You know, it's no longer maybe about politics. You know, it's really about creating a new identity that brings everyone together. So I would actually recommend that you watch the video and see for yourself. You know, I'm a Beyonce fan, so I don't know about you.
Neri, can I just join in, because we got 5 minutes left.
Go ahead.
And I just wanted, if I can, for me to drive this particular chariot home to the end, and ask all of the panelists for just a quick answer. We have 5 minutes left, and if I could come to each of you in turn and ask, what does the future look like for the African jewellery industry? Monica, can we start with you out in Nairobi?
Thank you, Edward. For me, the future for the jewellery sector in Africa is about working with Africa. Working together as Africans to position the jewellery sector and tapping into the opportunity. And for those out of Africa, working with Africans for more inclusivity of Africans in the jewellery value chain, right? So that the future is also African for the sector.
Thank you. Same question to you down there in Johannesburg, Labi. How does the future look like? Labi?
Well, I think the future is very, very bright. Here in South Africa, they had a series of skills programs. Can you hear me?
Yep, go for it.
Yes. Edward, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, I said I think the future is very bright, because here in South Africa, they've had quite a few skills programs already in place where they have beneficiation, where they want to actually, from the ground to the mine, from the mine to the retail, and so they want to have the whole value chain. They're encouraging the young people to take that route, and even the government even have a scheme where they encourage you to learn the profession. Not that they're going to give you a huge salary, but they even pay for your bus fare to go to learn a trade. So that's a bonus in itself. Because as I learned by, and I think I said in the documentary, by luck and by chance to get into the industry. Excellent. And it shouldn't have to be that way. Yes, I did manage to succeed. I believe I've succeeded in, but it's better if you have that opportunity where someone tells you about a particular program and you can go and join it without the stress that I was going through when I was learning the industry. I took cuts in pay as well in order to get into other places as well.
Thank you, Labi. And running out of time here, but Satta, the future for you. What does it look like from your perspective?
Just to quickly go there, I think there's a tremendous opportunity, and I think we're going to see more innovative and disruptive design thinking coming from the sort of made in Africa, inspired by Africa offerings. I think we're going to see a lot more of what actually the Italian trend vision forecasting team refers to as silo-less mentality. I think that we're going to see a lot more of that. I think for designers based on the continent, they still have to grapple with those challenges. But I think the last 6 months has taught us all to be, more innovative in our approach and think outside the box. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see. I'm really excited, and cannot wait. The future's bright.
I can hear the excitement in your voice. Patricia, for you, final thoughts.
What I can say from a Zambian perspective is de-siloing, getting everyone working together, because for us, for what I can see, the value chain is already there, but the different partners do not communicate. So de-siloing, and then more women working as goldsmiths. I've got a lot of young women who are into jewellery making, and they're ready to take over. The skilled goldsmiths are also ready to work with everyone else. So I see the industry coming together under one umbrella to develop the industry.
And Nere, I know you've done a wonderful job today as moderator, and thank you so much for that. But you're not going to get away without me asking you one question. What does the future look like for the African jewellery industry from where you sit in Lagos?
The future is very bright. I've just been commenting on how, I think Monica said this earlier, I can't even call it serendipity, what has happened. I mean, Edward, you called me about this a few months ago. We were just talking about this, Sibjo, and just suddenly there's just a strong interconnection already happening with African designers in really trying to solve the problem of the value chain and finding our voice. So the future is bright. That's by virtue of this connection. So, yes.
Can I just add one more thing? Taking ownership of the resources and using them to our advantage.
Excellent point to finish on. Ladies and gentlemen, from my perspective, I think we've provided the most colourful. Look at the outfits of the ladies and look at the beautiful bow tie on. So we've definitely had the most colourful of, I think, the panel discussions we'll have here at Voice this weekend. And we've also brought in references to music as well. So the African continent has been well represented. On behalf of Gaetano Cavalieri, the president of Sibjo, we want to tell you all, and all of those listening on the continent of Africa, that Sibjo is your home. We ask you and we invite you to contact Sibjo with how we can help and how the industry can help to support you in partnership as you step forward into the bright new dawn that is the African jewelry industry. Thank you so much, Labi. Thank you, Monica. Satta, thank you. And Satta, you'll be appearing in another presentation at The Voice on Monday, I believe. Patricia, thank you so much for being here on this lonely stage with me. It's been wonderful. And Nere, what a wonderful job. You're a moderator par excellence. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and also to IEG for hosting us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Edward.